Hi, Diego.
How are
So
you doing?
happy to see you. So glad you're here with me today. Welcome to Art Blender.
Oh, well, it's an honor and a privilege to be here to talk to you today. I hear you have some questions for me
Yeah, I certainly do. And I want to hear about your skulls.
about my skulls.
Your skulls. You have some skulls to
Oh, well,
show
I
me.
do have some skulls. What do you mean in terms of aesthetically or historically, or what sort of what about the skulls?
Just really about maybe the history about them and just to start.
To start, well, interestingly enough, I often, when I'm teaching art classes at the Mission Cultural Center or teaching art making, in particular paper mache making, I'll get into Day of the Dead because I'm a Mexican and I will teach sort of the Mexican tradition of paper mache making, and we'll discuss skull iconography, and I always bring in how it became, how it originated. Actually, from my culture, I'm a descendant of the Aztec individuals. They used skulls as a symbol of power. In fact, when they defeated their opponents, they collected their skulls. So literally when Hernan Cortez came into Mexico, that'd be central, maybe 1519, 1518, or that period of time, where Hernan Cortez, during that period of time, noticed all these collections of skulls around, and he was horrified. Of course, to the Aztec culture, they didn't know why he was so horrified, but to the European culture, it was a symbol of death, which is interestingly enough, that's what something I bring up in my art classes, is that in European culture, the human skull is a symbol of death and pestilence. But in Latin American culture, I have one example here of something that I've made. A skull out of paper
Wow.
mache. It looks like ceramic. It is a symbol of power and rebirth. So the Aztecs viewed the human skull as a symbol of power and rebirth, and the Europeans saw it as a symbol of death. Actually, these two cultures they were forced to merge at some point or another, and you have more of a development and popularity of the human skull being even seen today. We see skulls everywhere, and if you ask a Latino what the skull will mean, they'll again say, well, it's power and it's about force and all that sort of stuff. And you ask an individual who may have more European background, well, that's very macabre, and that's where so there's still that conflict going on today. It started, guess what, way back in 1519.
Well, I think that's wonderful that you have an art form that brings up so much
Yes.
discussion.
Yes.
How many sugar skulls would you say in your career that you've made?
I don't know. I started to research the history and development of the sugar skulls in central Mexico. I don't know, a long time ago. Many hundreds of sugar skulls. That's an entirely different tradition of it. I don't know, many hundreds. I have no idea how many sugar skulls I've made.
Well, speaking of hundreds, I know that you've been written up in many magazines, articles, something like over 500 publications,
I don't know.
LA
Something
Times,
crazy.
New York Times.
Yeah.
Do you feel that with the notoriety that you've had, do you feel like you've made it?
No. Oddly enough, I'm not too impressed by critics or anything like that. I just don't pay attention to them. And I'm sure they won't like to hear that, but I've always said the same thing. I'm not in it for them. I'm in it for the art. I mean, I don't really, I mean,
That's-
there's a lot. I mean, literally my press package, you got a press package, which was my small one. My press package is actually this big. But in a sense, it's true that I have critical acclaim and all that sort of great stuff. It's sort of nice, but in a sense, I'm not in it to make them happy. I'm in it because I want to provoke that thought, and I also want to proceed with my art and proceed with the culture of the art and that sort of stuff. I don't pay too much attention to it. I have to to an extent.
Yes.
Let's say the New York Times will call me and ask me what I think about blah blah blah, or I'll get an article in the Los Angeles Times, which is, these guys are big, so I have to pay some sort of attention to it. But in a sense, also, I mean, I have better things to do to pay attention to what people are saying to me. I want to produce artwork.
And that's
Yeah, that's what I want to do.
awesome. That's wonderful. I love to hear that
Yeah.
because that's what we're trying to promote right here.
Yeah,
you know,
about the art.
is doing art for the love of it,
Yes.
and just doing it for art's sake.
Yeah.
One question, a little more service level. I know that you grew up on the picket line,
Well,
and that sounds like it was a bit dangerous, actually. I mean, how did growing up on the picket line affect your art?
well, I'm a political artist, and I have worked for social justice my entire life. In fact, most members of my family have. Literally, Cesar Chavez would stay at our house during the 60s because there were hitmen after him, believe it or not. And he knew a number of safe houses to stay in. By the way, Cesar Chavez was a really nice guy. Just to let you know, and his bodyguards are very nice. I remember getting up as a little boy and meeting Cesar a couple of times. He was staying over our home. So that's what sort of the beginning of my consciousness as to, the whole political movement. Yeah, I sort of grew up on the picket lines. I hate to skip around in terms of that. Yeah, sort of from the beginning. My parents were very politically active during the '60s, the anti-war movement, and certainly the advancements of the United Farm Workers and that sort of stuff. So I sort of grew up on that. I didn't know anything else. I literally, my first works of art were literally picket signs. My father would say,
Wow.
"Jake would start doing the picket signs." So obviously, my talent showed even when I was a very small kid. So they had me do picket signs and that sort of stuff, and I sort of just grew up in working for social justice and that sort of thing. And I'm in my 60s. I still work for a city and county. Currently work for a city and county. I work in social services. I can't give you the name of the company.
Right.
Yeah, I don't know if they want me.
So you obviously oh, I'm sure they want you. I mean,
they
you, but it's not that you really, you put so much of what you've lived and who you are into your art, and it's a way of, as you said, expressing so many different aspects of life, the good and the good
Yeah.
and the bad.
Both. I mean, a lot of my work has to do with, like I said, but all my work has to do with this human condition at some capacity. In fact, just recently there was a documentary done of me, and literally I'm very critical of other artists who don't have a particular subject matter which is of any substance. For example, there's lots of art produced that doesn't have a subject matter of any substance, so people forget it. And it's always the art that has a strong subject and strong subject matter, which exists today,
Yes.
and it continues to exist. And I give an example of David. Michelangelo's, actually he took it over, he inherited that project from somebody else. People still look at that statue and they still reproduce it. Obviously there's a subject matter involved. It's a big guy versus a little guy and the little guy winning and that sort of stuff. Even farther than that. I mean, subject matter is very important in art, at least I think so.
Well, and you seem like a very intellectual artist, which it's not just some artists throw things together, which is wonderful, and they come up with something great, but you seem to come to it with so much history and so much knowledge of and I personally love that.
Yeah, I'm constantly reading. You mentioned it to me a little bit earlier. I'm constantly reading about economics and history. I don't know too many artists that are. I'm just fascinated by economics, stocks, bonds, and that sort of stuff, investments. And in fact, I have 6 months of business law, I believe, and I do have a legal background in that sort of stuff. A lot of it was business. Interesting enough, not too many artists do. So I don't have a whole lot of friends who are artists because I can't communicate with them on a whole lot. I don't know what to say. We're going to discuss the history of or this socio-political event which happened, or this particular economist wrote a book on blah blah blah. It just doesn't happen.
Yeah,
It doesn't happen. So a lot of my friends, they're just curators. I don't have too many friends who are artists. No, not too many.
So a question that I would like to ask has been, what type of media do you prefer to work in? So could you explain to me what
This is paper
is
mache.
made of? Okay.
This is, believe it or not, it looks like ceramics. People will like, it looks like ceramic. This is paper mache. It's paper mache. Literally, it's just paper mache. I don't know what to tell you. It's basically newsprint and some sort of a other solution. But in this particular, what's going to do water. It's flour and water, and that's pretty much it. Interesting enough, it's very strong.
May
This
I?
one.
Yeah.
May you? Yes, you may.
Wow.
Yeah.
It just has such power when you hold it. I mean, it feels powerful. It feels powerful. I love it.
May the force be with you.
So I know that you've worked in wood
Yes.
as well, and you bring a medieval style to that work.
I sure do.
Could you explain a bit more about that?
Well,
please?
I have about 20 years of showing woodcuts. I did a lot of political woodcuts.
No, what's a political woodcut?
A political woodcut is a print. All that it is a print. A woodcut is a print made out of wood. An artist cuts an image out of wood and places ink on it, and then places paper on that. And guess what? You get a woodcut. When you pull it out.
Wow.
So yeah, I do a lot of that. But there's a huge tradition of political artists who do woodcuts, all the way dating back for the Albrecht Dürer and these guys, who are the origination of woodcuts and that sort of stuff to modern times. Where people are producing woodcuts and art and that sort of stuff. I had about 20 years of doing shows and that. After a while, I got tired of it though. I mean, I told myself, I want to be known just as the woodcut artist. So I started to explore other things. Started exploring watercolors, acrylics, paper mache, all these other different things, because I just didn't want to just do that all the time. So, but that's just my artistic expression. That's me working around my artistic world.
But if I can say, do you have... I know this is hard. It's like, for me, I sing. I love to sing many different styles. And so it's hard for me to pinpoint what I like. What medium would you say gives you the most joy?
None of them.
So it's
None
just
of them do.
each one gives
I'm
you
never happy
something.
with anything I ever. I'm never happy with anything I ever do anyway. I mean, None of them. I just happen to do paper mache. Today I'm doing a lot of paper mache works currently, but it may change pretty soon. Am I happy with my works? Never. I'm never happy with any. I don't think I've ever had.
Well, I think artists, we're our own worst critic, right?
Yeah.
We're our own. Yeah.
But I mean, often people, I get bothered by people. I'll do a painting and then you sort of toss it. And people go, "How could you toss it?" Really? Yeah, believe me, I'll toss it because after it's completed, I have no interest in it at all. No.
Because you're moving on to the next piece.
There's no more to
thing.
do. Yeah, there's no more to do.
So I'm curious. You mentioned Albert
Albrecht Dürer.
Dürer. I know that he's a big influence for you.
Yes.
Could you explain that a bit more, please?
Well, his subject matter, his draftsmanship, and his sense of design. A lot of his subject matter had to do with good and evil, in conflict, and good prevailing. That was the subject matter that I appreciated in my work. Also, Juan Posada was another Mexican artist who also was a big influence. Also, he was a tremendously good draftsman. This guy could draw better than everyone else in the world at the time. So a lot of the draftsman techniques and that sort of stuff, I make sure to incorporate in my work because I think they're powerful and they communicate.
So who else influences you?
Influenced me? I'm influenced by just a lot of different stuff. Visual artists, Katie Kolowitz was another artist. But the number one influence I think of my life is probably Jose Clemente Orozco, the big Mexican muralist. In fact, I've told the same story to everybody, and it's the truth. This is my influence. Orozco's influence on me has been profound since I was a little tiny boy. Literally, when I was 3 years old, my father took me to go see the murals of Jose Clemente Orozco in Guadalajara. And he took me to go see this mural called Man of Flames, or El Hombre de Fuego. And he lifted me up to see this mural. And at that instant, it's the funniest thing, and I've repeated the story, and it's absolutely true. At that instant that I looked up at that big, huge mural, I knew what I wanted to do. And I was 3 years old. I was 3. Not 20, I was 3. I looked up and bam, it was like I don't know how to describe it. It was like almost a chemical change in my body. I knew what I wanted to do. I knew what I wanted to say. And I was a little boy.
That, I think, is very powerful and says so much because I think many artists, and you're one of these artists who has had a very successful career to date.
Been lucky.
Been very exact.
God has been kind to me.
Yes.
God has been very kind to me.
But that if you knew this from a very little boy, it is such a part of you.
Yeah.
It is who you are. Well, would you say it's who you are?
Yeah, to some extent, yeah.
So I know that you have a passion for and discussing about art teachers and the lack of qualified art teachers in the public school system.
Yep.
And that is something that I truly believe in. I'm very passionate and want to do more to help to get arts and music and create a richer environment in the schools, because I know many schools have had to cut that. And could you just tell me a little bit about that?
Well, my arts did very easily, man. I started going to professional art school when I was a little boy, maybe about 13 or 14, because my public art teachers were so lousy. These guys, and it was obvious that the institutions and other institutions at the time just didn't take their art departments very seriously. Yeah. So they gave us these teachers. I guess they had some sort of credentials in terms of teaching, except for they didn't teach skills, and they didn't take it seriously, and the students didn't take it seriously. As a result, you got a lot of junk coming out of there. I wish they would take these things more seriously. I mean, they certainly took the football team seriously. They certainly took the basketball team seriously. But the visual arts, nobody took it seriously. So I remember being about 13 or 14 and telling my father, I want to go to professional art school. No. I went to the phone book and started going to professional art school when I was a little guy. Partially the reason of that was the art schools in high school were so bad. And as a result of that, maybe I was about 14 or 15. I was a journeyman draftsman by the time I was 13 or 14 years old. So I literally painted and drew better than my art teachers at that age. Of course, it infuriated them. Ha, ha, ha. I had a great old time at it because I remember, just bugging a couple of these teachers. Hey, can you do this? I'd do a portrait really fast. Can you do that, dude? And then they would look humiliated or whatever. But I'm sure I had a great time at it, which didn't make me very popular with the art staff there.
So what would you define as a good art teacher?
An art teacher, first of all, you have to have a good sense of human compassion. You have to have a great sense of humanity. And you have to know the history, and you have to have the skill. Those are the big things. Because you can have some art teachers who don't necessarily have the skill, but they do have the drive, and I have had a couple of art teachers who aren't the best artists, but they're really good teachers. But
Yes.
again, there's a skill element, there's a historical element that you have to have, and you have to have some sort of skill level. And have some sort of sense of humanity a little bit. That also helps.
Well, and definitely, and I think as an artist, it's so important for us artists. I mean, I'm an artist as a singer and
Sure,
a poet.
you're a writer,
You
yeah.
know, writer that my writing I bring from here. I don't want to lose the heart of it. I don't want to lose the heart of it because that for me that is what it is, and I'm sure for you as well. I mean that is, I want my art, my writing to be as authentic as me as possible, and I don't want to change that for anybody. And I know that you wouldn't change your art.
And I want to illustrate one of your books too.
Oh,
I will do
would
it.
love that.
I'll do it gratis because I'm at the stage of my life where I used to just do things gratis. I'll do it because I want to do it. You give me your copy. I'll do your cover and illustrate it. What the heck?
Oh, that would be a blessing. I would love that.
No problem. We can do these things.
So, is there anything that you would like to add? You know, I am a great admirer of yours.
You're very kind.
You have an amazing talent and just the heart and the passion that you put in to your work, and you also help others. You know, could you tell me a little bit about some of the events that you go to, and you have workshops and you hold workshops? Could you explain a little bit more about that what you do in the community?
Well, what I do in the community, first of all, I work in social services. I work with a lot with individuals who are coming out of jail systems, and some of them are in shelters and that sort of stuff. I help rehabilitate them, quote unquote, and help get them jobs and education. That's one aspect of what I do. Another aspect, I just teach. I'm an art teacher. I work and teach, in fact, every year at the Mission Cultural Center or any other colleges and universities that hire me to speak, and there's plenty of those. And that sort of stuff. Also, for local, a number of other international companies promote my art classes and that sort of stuff. So I sort of work with a lot of venues. In fact, I'm meeting with someone tomorrow. We're going to put together my teaching schedule at the Mission Cultural Center for 2020 and that sort of stuff. So I do a lot of different stuff. But again, all of it has to do with culture at some extent, or the expansion and helping of humanity at some extent.
So, what is the next step for you as far as to help humanity? You know, you've done so much in your career to date. What is the next step for you?
Just to continue doing what I'm doing until I drop dead, pretty much. First and foremost, I'm a 60-year-old man. I know I don't look like one because I'm a Planet Fitness nut. But just to continue doing what I'm doing and to help others. I mean, individuals who may have the same vision, help them along a little bit, or other artists, help them along a little bit and that sort of stuff. I think that's very important. Someone at my age can give good advice and that sort of stuff.
Yes.
I think that's very important also. So I think that just continue doing what I'm doing and maybe help out some individuals who may need a little help every now and then.
Well, and I think that's wonderful that if an artist who loves and is good and is just so talented isn't stuck in here, and they can give back.
I should hope so.
Give back to people.
I should hope so.
And that's what we're trying to do here at Art Blender, and I'm so thankful and so happy that you came on our show. And
well, I deeply appreciate you having me on your show. I should say something though. Those artists out there I am talking to, just keep it up. I know society wants to beat you down and have you not do artwork. Just continue with it. Continue doing your artwork. Continue with your own vision, and continue being creative. And never grow old. Please never grow old. A very old artist told me that when I was a very young man. His name was Mish Cohn, very famous artist. He told me, and he was in his 70s. He goes, "Whatever you do, Diego, don't grow old." And now I know what he was talking about. I'm 60 years old. I'm constantly learning new stuff, making mistakes, screwing up. But you learn from your mistakes. Learning new stuff, making sure my body's in good physical shape, that's very important. But most important, I keep the creative process going on, and I'm learning new stuff all the time, which is part of the reason I'm on this show, to learn from you.
yeah, we all artists learn from artists, and we never grow old.
I love that comment.
Thank you, Diego.
Honor and a privilege, dear.
Thank you.